Hi, everybody. I'm Allyson Gavaletz. I'm a bookseller at Barnes & Noble, and today I'm talking with Adrienne Young, the author of A Sea of Spoken Things. Thank you for being here, Adrienne. I'm so excited to talk to you.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So usually, I just have to do a shout out. Usually we do a spoiler-free conversation to all the listeners. This book is very hard to not talk about spoilers, so we will do our best. But if you really do not want it to be spoiled, go read the book first and then come back to listen to all of this.
Yeah, this is definitely one of those books. I feel like my last book, my last adult novel was like that as well. It's really hard to talk about without spoiling.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so I just have to say, so much happens in this book. I read it first so fast, and then I had to reread it again for this. And those last 100 pages, girl, there's so much that happens, and so much happens throughout the whole book. And then you get to the last 100 pages, and you're like, "What? This is wild!" So it's crazy. And it has everything. It has nostalgia of going home. It has lost loves, missing people, death. I mean, really, what more could you ask for in a book? So first off, I have to ask about the title. When I first read it, read the book, I was like, "Oh yeah, a sea." And then as I was rereading it, I looked at the title and I was like, "Duh, a sea of unspoken things." That's basically a line in the book. Where'd you get the title?
Well, the title journey for this book was very long and arduous, and I just had a working title for a really long time where the document was just called Owl. It was just like a throwaway, like placeholder, like was never going to be the title. And a lot of the titles that I liked for this book really leaned so like mystery thriller that it really didn't accurately represent the other aspects of the book. And so my editor and I went back and forth 1,000 times, which tends to be the case because I'm very picky about titles. This title kind of just jumped out at me when I was editing, and I read this particular line of dialogue from one of the characters and was like, that kind of encapsulates, the whole story in a lot of ways from a lot of different directions. And I also really like that it reflects kind of this picture of there's a moment in the book where James is looking out at the sea and kind of thinking about her brother and kind of how that reflects him. And so I really love that the title wound up, in my mind, kind of calling back to that moment as well.
When you write a book, do you generally know what the title is? Does that come later? How does that work?
I think everyone's situation is different. I'm very fortunate in the fact that both of my publishers, my teams, they want to work collaboratively on title and cover, right? But a lot of authors don't have any or much say at all in that kind of thing. So I'm very grateful that I'm able to be collaborative with my publishers. But sometimes I have the title from the beginning. My debut novel was that way. Another one of my fantasy series was that way. And then other times I don't know. And if I don't know, then I kind of procrastinate and put it off until I have to pick a title. And then my editor's like, we have to have a title, And then we start the whole long process of trying to nail down a title. But the title is so important in what it communicates to the reader, from the shelf. Yeah, I know you understand this as a bookseller,
Yes.
but it has to do such a huge job and appeal to the right readers. And so I feel like it's always just a really big undertaking to choose that final title.
It's kind of like choosing a child's name, I would imagine.
It is. And then you're stuck with it forever.
Exactly.
It's like with titles, I mean, sometimes books are repackaged with new covers, but they don't get new titles, So it's like, you're really stuck with that title forever.
Yeah. Well, this is a good one. I do really like it. This book pulls you in from the beginning, and I felt the same way when I read Unmaking of June Farrow. How do you do that? Not a lot of authors can, but how do you do that?
I've been thinking about this a lot because I feel like a lot of the reviews of my books really harp on the same things, which is atmospheric. I felt like I was there, pulled me in, all of that kind of stuff. And I want to understand more of like how I do that. Because I think a lot of it is instinctual and I don't always think about the mechanics because it does come down to almost a science, right? From the writing perspective. And I feel like I haven't totally reverse engineered exactly how I do that, but I know a lot of it has to do with description. I guess my best answer is that I feel like I'm very picky about what I'm describing and how long I spend describing it. And so I think a lot of times, you read really descriptive novels, but they spend so much time describing that you're pulled out of the moment that the character's in. And
Mhm.
or the reverse, where things are moving so fast and there's not a lot of description happening. So even if you're interested in what's happening in the scene, you don't feel like you're there. So I feel like that is a very, very delicate balance. And I really do agonize over it in every chapter. So when I'm revising, it's a really high priority for me. And I think a lot of it comes down to that.
It's great. It's wonderful. I love it. Well, this kind of goes to the atmospheric thing that you were just saying, but you paint quite a picture of eeriness in Trentham Gorge. And was it inspired by anywhere in particular?
Yeah, I think a lot of the places in this book are inspired by a lot of places that I've been in Northern California. I lived there for 15 years and spent quite a bit of time camping in the redwoods, hiking, taking my kids to Muir Woods and things like that. And it's just such a special area. There's nowhere else like it. And the coastal aspect too of those like really dense forests, not very far from those like really rocky, misty cliffs, very severe coastline, is just such an amazing mixture and very inspiring to me. I knew I wanted to set this book in Northern California, but I didn't anticipate like how much I'd be pulling from my own memories. Trentham Gorge isn't necessarily a specific place I've been in Northern California, but I've been to many places like that. And I feel like I was kind of pulling together all of my favorite visceral details from a lot of different places to kind of put it into one, specific kind of fictional place.
I have friends that got married up like an hour from Eureka, so kind of right in that area. And it
Yeah.
is so beautiful and it is eerie. So I kept putting myself back there because it is like a rocky coastline and it's so beautiful, but so dense.
Yeah. And so quiet. I think that, I
Yes.
mean, with the exception of the beaches, right? It's those forests are just so muted and silent. They are very eerie. And with a lot of there's always fog and mist. And, it's just like, it's just waiting to be a setting for a
Yeah,
movie or whatever.
it is. It's so good. There's such a funny idea that people have that we're the only ones who keep on living a life. And when we go back to a place, we're so surprised that people have aged, things have changed, and that the lives there have kept on living. Can you speak to that?
Absolutely. I feel like I really relate to this because I grew up in Texas
Mhm.
in a pretty small little suburb outside of Dallas,
Mhm.
and my entire family is still in Texas. So, like my aunts, uncles, cousins, all my extended family, everybody's there. I'm the only one who has left, with maybe the exception of one or two other people. And going back, my mom still lives in the house that I was a teenager in. And just the way things change over time, I go home once or twice a year. And then my family comes to visit me as well. And we're all still very close. And just seeing how things change, when you're gone and driving down roads that used to be farmlands and buildings where there didn't used to be, and just the total feel of the area is very different than it was when I was growing up there. And it is just a very displacing, like disjointed feeling, and I do think it also, when you remove yourself from the place that you grew up in and, came of age, it does provide a unique opportunity to kind of maybe reflect on your adolescence in a different way than if you also became an adult there. So it's a very interesting experience and one that I continue to live like every time I go home.
Yeah, it is wild. I haven't been back to the place where I grew up in a long time, but when I do, like there were roads that were different and it's like so jarring. It totally messes with the memory and the nostalgia that you have of that place. It's really crazy to experience that. I have to ask where outside of my dad lives outside of Fort Worth. And
Mhm.
so he lives in a tiny town called Aledo.
Oh yeah, I grew up in Saxe, which is
Oh,
like right outside, right by Garland.
oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah, it's like right there, like on the little outskirts.
Yeah. It's
Not
pretty
really the
nice.
outskirts anymore, though. I mean, it's
Yeah.
all built up now.
Yeah. That's so true. All right. Also, to that point, James is figuring out that you can also be different people in different situations. At one point, she says, "The girl I was in the classroom and the one I'd become at Byron were like two different species. I didn't know anymore which I really was." James is kind of stuck in those two different worlds. There's one that she left Six Rivers to search for, and one that she's hidden deep down but is still there. Can you
Mhm.
speak to that?
Yeah. So I think, we all kind of have this experience, whether we left home or not, but we all go through this thing, in becoming an adult, that you're kind of trying on different identities. And I think for James, she was not only kind of running from the past in her hometown, but also running from this like archetypal view of her mother, right? Who's kind of a very
Yeah.
background character in her story. It's almost kind of part of the lore of the town. But I think she's trying to reject and reform, like her future. And for her, it's even more complicated because she also grew in the shadow of her brother, and her identity was shaped around her brother. And so going somewhere new and recreating herself or reinventing herself and trying to be apart from him and be a singular entity, I think was really important for this character in particular. But of course, she has to reckon with that when she goes home and see kind of like sift through the parts of that were about becoming her own person and the parts that were just about kind of hiding from the truth.
And it takes a lot for her to reckon with it. And she also is carrying so much guilt. Like
Yeah.
she carries guilt for her own self, and then she carries the guilt for all of her brother's life as well. And it's just so much that she comes home with. And I mean, she sees one person and she just like kind of keeps her head down from everybody. And
Yeah.
it's interesting because they don't necessarily think of it in the same way. But she really carries all of that.
Yeah, she's really the only person. Well, maybe not the only person, but I feel like she knows more of the story than most of the characters, right? And so the burden she's carrying is really heavy. I think that guilt is just very defining for her.
All right, this is where spoilers might come in because we have to talk about Sadie and Olivia. They're such unassuming characters, and they are the ones who stayed on in the town, and it's kind of where James has been like almost a little bit like, oh, they ended up here, which is what I didn't ever want to do, and look, they're still here. But then she kind of also realizes they have a good life and they seem very happy, and so it's
Yeah.
really nice for her to recognize all of that. But they're also just very unassuming. So I'm trying not to give anything away, but I didn't see it coming. Sadie is just so protective of Ben, her child, and I'd love to know what you think she was thinking when she heard the good news about Ben and that reality, and if she had any regrets about what she did or if she still would have made the same choice.
So I love these characters too. And I think they provided a very cool opportunity for James to confront that, that view of her mother, that fear about becoming her mother, because she has to see it in action, right? And see that exactly what you said. Like, these people are happy. They chose this life. But yeah, so I think when Sadie gets the good news about her son Ben, I think she is incredibly relieved. Like, I just imagine like a body consuming relief to have gotten that information, right? But I think that the second part of the question is very complicated because I imagine that she does have regrets, but I also feel like her decisions were more complicated than maybe what is face value. Like, I think, her past with Johnny and, all in her past in the town and her identity and even her son, I think that it's kind of a very hairy situation. And so I don't think it was as straightforward as maybe one could believe. So yeah, I think she's a very complicated person.
Yeah. I think it also, I don't have children, but I would imagine maybe she doesn't because you would still do what you needed to do to protect your child. So even though there's relief that he wasn't there, she still was like, I would imagine probably would do it again, I
Yeah.
think.
I absolutely think if she had to do it over again with the same information, she would make the decision again. No question.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And Olivia. She seems so sweet. She is so sweet, but she has the deepest secret of them all. And she, I think, is the one who isn't as at peace with staying there. You know, she sees James, who did get to go out and kind of live the dream that they had together. And then there's Sadie, who is perfectly happy having a family, you know, there. But Olivia's kind of that secret that she really wasn't okay with that. And it kind of comes out in a very interesting way.
Yeah, I think that James coming back to town really touches on that nerve for Olivia of what could have been, and not being special. She has this line in the book where she's like, some people are just special, and it's so sad because it just rings of this feeling that she isn't, and she knows she isn't. So with Olivia, I think I think that maybe even more than she understands, that sense of failure was very much a part of forming who she is, right? And seeing history repeat itself as an adult, she when she was younger, she watched James go off and get the dream and do the thing that she thought she would be doing. And then many, many years later, she kind of has to go through the same thing as a bystander and a witness to that same story playing out. And there's just this very unsettling parallel, right, between the two stories that I think it does trigger something in Olivia that is unexpected, maybe even to her.
Yeah. And I don't really know how to quite phrase the question that I have in my mind, but I also found such a parallel between Olivia and what happened and Griffin Walker. You know, it was the same area, it was the same similar situation. And so I wonder if there's something there with James, like being able to kind of call Olivia out for it in a way that she couldn't for herself or for her brother.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the thing that makes this story more, I don't know what the word for it is, like gray, it's like, it's not a black and white story, and morally, it's a morally gray story. And I think the fact that James, our heroine, right, she has firsthand knowledge of these very controversial kind of things that are happening in the books and or in the book, and not just with her own past and her experiences, but with her brothers, and even the potential that her brother has made some really unforgivable mistakes. And so yeah, I think like with that, she can understand. I mean, I have the sense in the book, even writing the character, that she has an understanding and a almost compassion for Olivia that maybe a lot of people don't think they would have, but she can understand it in a different way.
Yeah. And I think it also, like, while she's there, she does have a realization of like, oh, this isn't so bad to come home. You know, you put such huge ideas between that space between you and coming home. And if she had just come home earlier, you know, maybe she would have been able to have those relationships and not be so afraid. And it wouldn't have been, like, anyway, that's all the interesting things to think about while you're reading the book that I found. Micah. I loved him. His character is so great to me. And I loved when he told James, and maybe this is the line you were talking about earlier, but it's what I was thinking about with the title. He told James, we could fill the ocean with the things we never said to each other.
Yeah.
That was the part of the book where I had to be like, ooh, lost loves. Man, they just know exactly what to say to you. Can you talk about Micah?
I just really love him. I have such a soft spot for Micah because I feel like he loved Johnny so deeply,
Yeah.
and he had a complicated relationship with Johnny as well. Everybody did. And so the fact that Micah's really the only one who knew Johnny like James did, I think bonds them in a way that is very unbreakable. But then, his continued loyalty to Johnny and to James is just something that everybody loves in a character, right? But he is just one of those. Okay, so the other thing I was going to say about him is that I love also that he doesn't hesitate to call James out on her stuff, like when she is trying to maybe bend the view of something or create a framework, he's like, no, like I love that. He's very straightforward. He's very like what you see is what you get. And I love people like that, and so writing a character like that is really, really fun as well. But yeah, he has a lot of moments in the book that I just really enjoyed writing. I love the very last scene with him going back, yeah, I won't say what it is, but toward the very end, there's a scene with him that I really love as well.
Yes. He shows up for people, and
Mhm.
he proves it over and over again. And one thing I love friendships that are like what he had with Johnny, where, they were kind of on the outs a little bit, but yet Johnny still just went and got his car and knew that that would be okay, even though they were kind of mad at each other. Like, I
Yeah.
just think that that is such a true friendship where, like, I know we'll get through this. I'm still going to borrow your car, but I
Yeah.
know you're mad at me. And they don't even talk.
Yes.
He just came home and the car was gone.
Right. Haven't talked really for months. And
Yeah.
then he's like, Johnny came and got the car, which, like, for people listening, like, you'll understand when you get there, like, you'll understand just what we mean by that. But yeah, they have a special bond that continues even after Johnny is gone.
Yeah, it's very much like brothers. I mean, they say that, but it's very much like brothers.
Yeah.
We have to talk about the connection between Johnny and James, of course.
Mhm.
This goes beyond regular twin connection. I was thinking that maybe part of the reason she was able to be away for so long is because she felt tied to him even when they weren't together. And Micah saw that too. And I think that's also, Micah saw their connection too, which I think was great. Can you speak to their connection?
Yeah. So I don't know if you know this, but I have a twin brother.
Oh, I
And
didn't know that.
yeah, so this book is very inspired by
Got
my
it.
experience as a twin. And so and we're one of four. I'm one of four kids in my family,
Mhm.
but and I'm close to all of my siblings, but there is something different about the connection you have with your twin. And
Mhm.
we're still very close as adults. We weren't so close when we were growing up, we're typical brother and sister fighting and all that, but we're close as adults. And there is this, I'm sure everybody has heard, right, about like the twin connection and the spidey
Yeah.
sense and that kind
Yeah.
of stuff. I do really believe in that. I really think that I've had a lot of experiences that kind of speak to that kind of thing. And this book was kind of taking that and making it into this fantastical element that kind of goes beyond death and is almost like a psychic connection, and her kind of tapping into Johnny's emotions and intentions and things like that. And so it's fun to play with something like this that I feel like I can relate to and maybe pull from my own experience, but then also turn into like a magic. That was really fun to do. And it plays a huge role in the book. Like it's not something that's like happening on every page, obviously, but it very much informs everything from the past and so much of what's happening in the present as well.
Can you share a crazy connection that happened with you and your twin brother? Do you have one?
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like I have a lot, and they're all like kind of little things. And a lot of them are just things like having a sense that something's not right.
Yeah.
So, just having an unsettling gut feeling that something just really isn't right and not knowing really what it is. I feel like when I was a teenager, I mean, that would happen when we were little, but it would happen when we were a teenager, when he's like out with friends or whatever. And we weren't like as close as teenagers because he was very much like the good twin and I was the bad twin.
Uh-huh.
And so we majorly fell into those kinds of roles. And I think a lot of times he was just like overwhelmed by me, just like very like, oh, Adrienne, like just so crazy, like things going on all the time and just like, leave me alone. But I do feel like there were a lot of times where I would kind of get that feeling and then find out something was going on, or call him and try to pin him down, even as like young adults, and be like, what's going on with you? Is something going on with you? I have a feeling there's something going on with you. And being like, no, there's nothing wrong. And then later you find out something's up. So a lot of things like that. Oh, here's one. This is really
Okay.
funny. This is like a funny, innocent one. There was one year in middle school where we had all of the same classes. And
Oh
I
my
don't
gosh.
know how that happened, but we were in every single class together.
Is that fun or not fun?
Um, I didn't mind it, but then after that year, the school made a rule that we could not be in class together anymore. And so we had this math teacher and she did not like me. Oh, most of my teachers did not like me. I wasn't very good kid, wasn't very obedient. And anyway, she was convinced that Adam and I were somehow cheating on our tests. And so she sat us on opposite corners and sides of the room so that there was no possible way we could cheat. And she still thought somehow we were cheating because we would get the same problems wrong on all of our tests.
That's
And
crazy.
yeah, and she was like, this isn't possible. This is not possible. Like, they have to be cheating. And we really weren't. We really were not cheating. And so anyway, she was like convinced, and she was on this war path all year to prove it. And she never did because we really weren't. But that was like a really funny one.
That's got to be so infuriating for a teacher, especially who doesn't like you.
She never won. I won for sure.
That's so funny. Oh, I have to ask about the owls. Do you like owls? Or did you just want to put them in there because it fit? Like, do you have a tie to owls?
I do love owls. I just think they're one of the most beautiful, majestic creatures on the earth. But also, I have a lot of memories of owls in the redwood forests. So, like hiking or camping, especially in that like very silent, very, very quiet atmosphere. And then all of a sudden, this like silent, shadow slips over you, and you look up, and there's a huge owl, like with a huge wingspan, just gliding silently through the air from one tree to the other. I've just seen a lot of things like that. And so for me, they are just intrinsically tied in my mind to those redwoods.
Yeah, it's a beautiful idea, an image. Do you connect with your characters? Like, is it hard to let them go after you finish writing them? Because since I've stopped reading this, I think about James a lot. And I read Unmaking of June Farrow a while ago, and I still think about that character too. Is it hard as a writer? Do you like glom onto them?
If I feel like the story is not finished, then it's hard for me to let go of them. But I feel like a sense of satisfaction in finishing their story, and once it feels complete to me, it feels natural to kind of let it go. And I still feel very attached to the characters. And, to me, especially my main characters, they just really do feel like real people to me. And so it is, there's always a sense of almost relief when the project is done and the story is done. But then I always, on release day, I have a tradition of listening to the audiobook of whatever book is releasing. And it always stirs up all of that. Because, by then you've been done with the book for quite a while by the time it's coming to shelves. And I always have this like thing that stirs up in me, this like sense of like attachment and emotion toward the character. By then, also I'm working on a new story that I'm like very being tortured by. So it's like I'm in a new mental stage.
I like that you go back and listen to the audiobook because I always wonder if authors go back and reread their book or listen to it, because recording artists, obviously it takes an hour, they listen to their album and it probably plays wherever they go. But authors, like, it's so intentional to sit down, read it or listen to it. So I love that you go back and read it. Is it more to just remember? Is it just like what is the reason? Do you just want to hear it again?
It's kind of, there's a lot of reasons. So first, it's kind of like celebratory, like I'm on release day. I'm not going to be able to sit down and read my book because they're busy days, but it's a way for me to kind of celebrate the story being finished and being out there. But then it's also a cool way to see the story presented in a different artistic way from the actors. And it's fun to me to see the interpretation of the story through the voice actors and the producers. I've been very lucky to have great teams produce my audiobooks. And so it's always kind of like a little treat, like a Christmas morning present, right? To listen to the audiobook. And then the other more practical reason is just two practical reasons is to refresh my memory on the book because I haven't read it in quite a while. And I know that, now everybody's going to be reading it and talking about it. So refreshing my memory, but then also doing the due diligence of listening to the audiobook, right? Because I need to listen to it because people review it and, also just make sure there's no mistakes and things like that. So it kind of pulls multiple roles for me.
Yeah, I like that tradition a lot. Do you have a favorite character from this book?
Oh, Johnny, I think. Johnny. And he, he's not even in the book,
Right.
like on the page, right? But he is also everywhere in the book. The book is like
Yeah.
steeped in him. But I just was so, I don't know, enthralled by him. I was very captivated by his character and just the impact and kind of shadow he left behind on everything, and his secrets and the way he dealt with things and the fallout. I really enjoyed him, and I was very tempted to write some scenes with him in them.
Hmm.
There's one small little flashback scene in there that you get to see him in action, like in person. But originally, this book had a lot of flashbacks in it, and I took them all out because it just didn't feel right. He really, I think, needed to stay in the shadows and be interpreted through the
Hmm.
people who remembered him,
Hmm.
instead of the reader getting the opportunity to form their own judgment on him, I think, because that's kind of the point of the story. So that was like a big 11th hour decision that I made. And I absolutely think it was the right one.
Yeah, I can see it how it keeps the eeriness a little bit there too, where
Yeah.
it's yeah, I like
Mhm.
it. What do you want people to take away from this book?
Um, I think one of the big questions that this book grapples with, or thoughts, I should say, is this idea of what it means to love and be tied to your family.
Mm.
And, even when they're really different from you, even when maybe they do things you don't agree with, or think things you don't agree with. And I think that's something that we can all relate to on some level. But I know that for myself, I'm really different than my family. I've felt, very much kind of like the black sheep growing up, but I'm still very close to them, and we all love each other and would do anything for each other. And I think a lot of us are capable of doing a lot more, and like capable of going farther for the people we love than we even maybe want to believe. So I'm intrigued by that kind of, I don't know, darkness in us all, for the sake of love and the power of that. And so I think maybe I hope that readers find themselves just maybe asking themselves those questions and reflecting on them and chewing on that a little bit. There's no real like lesson, I think, to be taken from the story. I really don't believe in trying to like teach anybody anything through a book, but like, I hope that people are just talking about it. I hope they're thinking about it and maybe contemplating, what that truth is for themselves.
Yeah, I love that. There's so much to talk about and think about in this book. So I love that perspective. How does it feel? Do you write differently when you're writing an adult book versus a not, excuse me, versus a YA book?
I mean, I feel like they're very different. So many authors will say the exact opposite.
Hmm.
So there's clearly different experiences out there. I've heard a lot of authors be like, it's the same. It's not for me at all. And I don't know if that is because the type of story I'm telling is so different. And I don't mean genre. I mean just the like usually every adult novel I've done so far, there's kind of like multiple timeline mysteries, and the supernatural element has some kind of like twist to it. And there's a mystery element, which is a totally different story structure as well. So I have to employ a totally different skill set, I guess, in storytelling, than I do with my young adult fantasy novels. And I would say I don't have a preference, because it's like I work on one and then I feel so invigorated to switch and go back and work on the other type of book. And then I'm ready to come back and do this other type of work. And it kind of just has a very nice flow for me creatively. But I think that the way that my adult novels are told take a lot more unraveling of the knot, and it's much more painstaking with the revisions and figuring out the story and reverse engineering things and doing things wrong before I can do them the right way, and that kind of thing. There's a lot of rewriting, whereas I don't find that so much in my young adult fantasy novels. It
Yeah.
feels much more like they come to me a little bit more straightforward. And so I think it comes down to kind of like the structure, the story type, and like the layers and all of that.
Are you a writer that has it all figured out at like an outline, or do you generally know where the characters are going? Like for this book, did you know how it was all going to come together and end, or is that a surprise to you?
No, it's so
Always so fascinating to me. So you just write and then the ideas come and then that last 100 pages just came to you?
yes, but
Wild.
here's the thing is it doesn't happen that cleanly. It like
Sure.
happens with my fantasy novels. It's like I am more of a discovery writer, so like I'll do a lot of story development on my world and my characters and the visuals and all of that. And I know what the premise, this is how all of my books come to me. I know what the premise is, but I don't know what the plot is. And
Mhm.
so I can start the book and I can see a little bit down the road, but I write to that point and then I can see a little farther and a little farther. Almost every book, I take a wrong turn somewhere and I have to go back and, tweak and figure out to get back on the right track. But with my adult novels, it is very difficult to do that because of the type of story the
Yeah.
mechanics it's so hard to wing it. Like it just doesn't work very well. So I've learned to do more outlining because I don't prefer to outline because I like to discover the story as I'm going. But I've learned that I have to do it more with my adult novels. Or I'm going to waste a lot of time, like
Sure.
a lot of time. So I do more outlining, but I don't outline the entire book. That really comes after a first draft, is where then I'm fixing things by doing the nitty gritty outlines.
That makes sense. That's cool. Well, we are a bookstore, so I have to ask, do you have any favorite books? And if so, what are they? Or if not, what's your favorite recent read?
I have so many favorite books
I
that I
know.
don't even think I could narrow them down. I'm trying to think of something I've read recently that I just was like so taken by last year, or it wasn't even last year, but Wrong Place, Wrong Time. I was like amazed by that book. It totally caught me by surprise. The I won't go into all of it, but did you read it by chance?
No, I didn't.
Oh my God. It's a story about a woman who, the book starts with her witnessing her son, her 18-year-old son, murdering someone in their front yard. And then he gets arrested and everything. And she goes to sleep that night and she wakes up and it's the day before. And then that night she goes to sleep and it's the day before that. And every day she's going back in time all the way, way back to before she even had him. And it's just this really amazing, like, contemplation on motherhood. And
Yeah.
oh man, I highly recommend it.
Okay.
It was really amazing. I feel like that's the last book that I read that just really, like, it still grabs me even talking about it now. I'm just like heart in my throat a little bit. It was so good.
I just wrote it down. That does sound fabulous. I need to read it.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, Adrienne, thank you so much for talking with us today. I am so excited to have your book out and for everyone to read it and to finally be able to talk to more people about it because I've exhausted it in the office. So thank
Yeah,
you so much.
thanks for having me. I love this book. I love talking about it, and I'm super excited for everybody to get to read it finally.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And go read, everybody, and enjoy it.
Thank you for listening. Poured Over is a Barnes & Noble production. To help other readers find us, please rate and review the show wherever you listen to podcasts.